When it comes to male loneliness, there is such an increase in avoidant attachment. It's the fastest growing attachment style according to all the research out there.
Right.
And I think the male loneliness epidemic is not just a male problem. This is a human problem. This is a systems problem.
Well, hello there, and welcome to this episode of the Terri Cole Show. I started this conversation with Dr. Morgan Anderson talking about the male loneliness epidemic and sort of approaching it with compassion and talking about modern dating. And we talked about love, and we talked about our own experiences with love and dating. So she's a clinical psychologist, attachment theory expert for sure. She has a book called Love Magnet, Get Off the Dating Roller Coaster and Attract the Love You Deserve. And you may know her from her podcast that I've been on multiple times. It's called Let's Get Vulnerable. And she's a wonderful clinician. She was a great interview. And I hope that you enjoy this informative interview with Dr. Morgan Anderson as much as I really did enjoy yakking with her. Well, hello. I'm super excited to welcome Dr. Morgan Anderson back to the Terri Cole Show. Morgan, welcome back.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited for our conversation.
We could talk and talk and talk, Dr. Morgan. You know this because we're both fully obsessed with love, relationships, relating, attachment, all the things that have to do with love and vulnerability. So I love all the stuff that you've been talking about lately. And we just thought we should get back together and actually talk about what people out there are talking about. So before we do that, I want to circle back around to, for any listeners or people watching this on YouTube who are unfamiliar with your work, tell us a little bit about, my first question is how you got here. So if you were a Marvel movie character, your origin story, why this obsession for you? How did you get here? And then we'll talk a little bit more about what you're doing now.
Yes. Like many people who find themselves in the field of relationships and helping people with relationships, I experienced early relational trauma. I lost my mom at 6 years old. And then I saw my dad go through really unhealthy relationships. And I remember just from a young age, even in middle school, this question of, but how do you have a healthy relationship? And how do people actually have people that they're close with and can rely on? I started asking myself that question very early. And then I was always that person that instead of playing on the playground, I just wanted to have these deep one-on-one conversations with people. Like, tell me your life story and let me help you, So call it early codependency or whatever you want to call it. But I was just trying to help people from a young age. And then I started my doctoral program in clinical psychology. I was in my second year of graduate school when I found myself in a relationship with a narcissist. And it was a year and a half long, went through all the stages, the love bombing in the beginning. I thought I'd met my perfect person. At the end of it, I was a total shell of myself. And it was like being outside of my body and watching someone else go through this hell of a relationship that I was in. And I just said, I can't keep doing this. I have to figure this out. Even though here I am getting my doctorate in clinical psychology, I had all this logical awareness. My patterns were repeating. So I would say it took me about a decade, but that's when I started researching attachment styles, how to rewire your brain and actually release past relational trauma. And through my own research for myself, I now have helped thousands of people become securely attached, no matter what their past has been. And I'm now happily married, and I have a relationship that feels good, that's secure. And yeah, that's kind of it.
What's amazing, and you've written a wonderful book called Love Magnet, Get Off the Dating Roller Coaster and Attract the Love You Deserve, for those of you who are wanting to have healthier love in your life. Don't worry, we'll put all the links in the show notes. And you have a really popular and wonderful podcast called Let's Get Vulnerable. And that's another thing that those of you guys listening, if you are in a situation that Morgan was in her life, or if you're trying to figure it out, I would say from my perspective, because I don't know, I think we're all motivated by sort of similar things. We teach what we most need to learn. At least I can say that is true for me. Every single thing I write about is something that was an excruciating pain point in my life. And similar to you, when it came to love, I was very much like, how could I be this smart and astute and successful in every pursuit that, if I was a talent agent, I was at the top of that game, whatever it is. Why can I not figure out this love thing? And it really became, like you said, like years of therapy of uncovering what is the deal. And for me, it was really started with having a father wound, and that's what my next book is about, how healing that then made me sort of available for a very long-term, almost 30 years, healthy, happy marriage. But from going from never wanting to get married, thinking, wow, that looks terrible, yeah. So let's move into the one thing that I wanted to talk about, because it's top of mind for a lot of people, is all of this conversation about the male loneliness epidemic. Like, what I want to know what you're seeing, and how do you think we can, rather than being sort of judging about it, because I find myself, I vacillate between wanting to be supportive and understand, even though my audience is mostly female. But, I have sons, and it's not all men. And so what are your thoughts on this?
I have to say real quick, I'm so happy you're writing about the father wound. So I'm so excited about this, Terri. That's just impacts so many people. So I'm very, very excited that that's your next book. And when it comes to male loneliness, there is such an increase in avoidant attachment. It's the fastest growing attachment style, according to all the research out there. And I think we have gotten into this place where there's all of this pseudo connection, which I know you get, right? Like the social media, the finding ways to get needs met that don't actually involve being present with another human being.
Yep. So like AI, right? I mean, we know Esther Perel just did an episode on Where Shall We Begin, her incredible pod. And she is coaching a man and his AI partner.
Ugh, yikes.
Yikes is right.
I don't know how I feel about that. It's scary. It's a scary new world. So there's all of this devaluing of relationships based on discomfort, based on beliefs that we're not good enough, based on fears of, am I going to be abandoned or am I going to be called out?
Right.
And I think the male loneliness epidemic is not just a male problem. This is a human problem. This is a systems problem. This is the messaging that we're also giving men, right? So I think there's this opportunity for people to hopefully have some kind of rebellion around this and say, hey, we can value relationships, and we get to find our own healing to where they can feel secure enough and safe enough that we can lean back in. I wish I had more answers around what that looks like. What are your thoughts on it?
I was just at the Psychotherapy Networker conference in DC. I was presenting, and I was there with a bunch of friends. And Connor Beaton, who has a podcast called Man Talks, he's married to Vienna Ferron. Anyway, we've been friends for many, many years, and I find his work to be very helpful and inviting, and it's for men, and it's to help men have an emotional IQ, to help them understand vulnerability is strength and not weakness. And it was interesting watching him in real time talking to sort of a younger therapist who ended up at this dinner with a bunch of us who had been keynoting and doing whatever, and there was so much tenderness that I could see in this interaction where, the one guy was saying something and Connor put his hand like right on his shoulder, and I was like, yeah, like men need the same things that we need. We've just been socialized differently, and I feel like so I said to Connor, let's do something, you and I. We'll start it as a Instagram live, which is, what do men want? What do women want? Like actually just talking about what is that, because I put up a carousel on Instagram, and it was kind of like something that had been going around. These trends happen, and it was there were all of these. Maybe there were 15 slides, and it was cover of a romance novel, all different covers, and it says the first line is "Tell me something romantic" is written on there, and then you make it your own by saying, I'll do my own boundary work so that my childhood injuries don't ruin our relationship. Right. So oof. I put all the answers, like what would a psychotherapist who's a boundary expert say is romantic. Yes. Right. So you get and it's 1.5 million views at this point. Like it's gone absolutely viral, where so many people saying, and women in particular saying, this is what I want,
Yes. And I love that so much, Terri, because it is what we want. And I think it's what so many of us know that we want logically. And then there's also this translation of, how do we start to feel safe as women with men being vulnerable and men really expressing their emotions? I know, and this is very vulnerable for me to share, and my husband would say it's okay, but he had a very hard time crying, never grew up expressing emotions.
Yep.
And I vividly remember the first time that he really cried in front of me. Mm-hmm. And some of my initial responses were not positive.
Yep.
And I think because we're trained this way, we're all trained that men are supposed to hold it in and not feel their feelings and not express themselves. So it's also our job as well to get comfortable, and what you said, the tenderness and the inviting, and we only have that capacity when we've shown up that way for ourselves first.
Yes. I think there really is something about that, the kindness and the compassion. With my husband, who is 10 years older than me, and we've been together, as I said, 29 years, he had a lot of therapy, and that was a prerequisite that I had, because I never really thought I was going to get married. But once he and I met and I knew we were gonna, I literally had a list a mile long of like what I wasn't interested in doing, and fixing someone else's broken wings and taking on all the emotional labor of the relation. Like I was like, I just want a grown up. I want someone who knows how to get tickets to the opera. You have a funded retirement plan. You own your home. And those were a bunch of things that were important to me. But I had dated a lot of men who had the emotional IQ of a sneaker. And I was like, I don't want that. I'm not interested, because how can I? And so I find that if you're really looking for someone who's had some therapy, I think that you can find it. But I agree with you that, listen, your husband is perfect for you as my husband is perfect for me, right? I never think that Vic would be perfect for anyone else, but he knows exactly how to treat me, to not be threatened. One of the prerequisites I had was someone who wouldn't be threatened by my career, by my success, by my brains, by my everything, by my extroverted nature, and that I love so many people that I cannot have a jealous, possessive type of a relationship. I had that one time in all of my life, and I hated it so much, and I would never, ever do it again. But I was clear. I've had the same friends since 1972. I travel with them every year, the same 7 women. These are important people that I will prioritize. And of course, my husband was a widower. He had kids. So I married a whole family, basically. Obviously, my family is for sure my priority. But I have to say, my friends are as essential to my happiness as my husband and my children and my grandchildren, and I live my life that way. Now, that takes a special kind of person to go, okay, because I was like, I need someone who has a huge career themselves, someone who is so passionate about what they're doing that I'm the icing on their already fully baked cake. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I think it's this awareness of men being able to say they have to get over this idea that they're not good at relationships or being in fear that they're going to get it wrong. And I think there is so much hating on men that we see as a
Yes.
culture and on social media that sometimes that criticism causes men to feel so stuck.
Yes.
So then they're not healing and they're
Yep.
not reaching out. And then the loneliness epidemic is increasing and they're getting needs
Yep.
met with AI or social media. And we really have to come together and say, none of us are perfect. You know, we're all going to make mistakes. There's always going to be learning and growing. And
Yep.
also for men to take ownership of just because I believed I can't do this or I'm bad at relationships, that's not a reason to just give up and be lonely forever, right? It's that deep knowing that you're worthy of connection. You're
Yes.
worthy of connection. You're worthy of relationships that feel good.
Absolutely. I think that there's this, we look at the way, you've got the red pill guy, the bros who are doing all this stuff where those men just literally hate women. So there's that where they're like, women are less than, women are this, women should stay at home, women whatever. So let's not even like, we're not even talking about the extremes, you and I, because that's like out of control.
No.
So if anyone who's a red pill guy is lonely, there you go. It's just, you reap what you sow, right? We're talking
Yes.
about regular guys who are on apps and feel like the women are only interested in the top 10%. And there's all these stipulations. And it's funny, my stipulations weren't like be rich and be 6'2", even though my husband is 6'2". But you know what I mean? It wasn't that. It was emotionally and take care of your health so that I don't have to, right? Because you're already 10 years older than me. So you can't ever get out of shape. And these were all literally stipulations, and I think you have to know what you want in a relationship. But for the men who are feeling sort of lonely and afraid, because I have to say, honestly, Morgan, that the whole like super hatred on all the all men thing, when I have 3 sons who are completely feminist and modern and regular, totally respectful, love their women, are totally great. My husband's been amazing to me always. It bums me out because I want to say not all men, and yet the sad thing is when I myself am faced with the question, if I were alone in the woods, would I choose a strange man or a bear? Maybe because I'm a country girl, I'd choose the bear. Like I feel more threatened by a stranger in the woods. And I don't know if that's just, you know what I mean? Like that's a sad state of affairs in a way, right? What we're talking about.
Yeah, this is an important conversation because, on one hand, we have everyone saying, well, change your beliefs about men and you're never going to find a partner if you believe that all men are trash and all
Yeah.
men are terrible, right?
Yep.
And there's some truth to that, right? Of, okay, we have to be open.
Yeah.
We have to be open, be grounded in reality, and also understand that, yeah, there are some men that are not emotionally intelligent, that can be hurtful, that could be physically abusive, et
Yep.
cetera, et cetera. So we have to weigh all of it. And doesn't it come down to trusting yourself enough and prioritizing tuning in enough that you say, yep, I'm going to set the boundaries that I need to set, and I'm going to make healthy relationship decisions, and I trust myself. And being able to say, yeah, I can keep myself safe.
Yep.
I think there's some of that.
I think you're right, which is why I think boundaries is such an important aspect of dating. And I'm always talking to my clients and my groups and my mastermind about setting boundaries in a dating situation early and often. And I know
Yes.
you talk about the overfunctioning aspect of women in relationships. So let's pivot a little bit and talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I think there's so much of that, and once again, it's what we're trained to do, and I think just realizing that early stages of dating, it is so important that you are showing up authentic, that you are showing up with boundaries, and that you're so clear on I am gathering the data on this relationship to see do I want to be in it, not I have to make this relationship work
Yep.
no matter what,
Yes.
right? So not the self-abandoning, this just what you said, that clarity when you were dating your husband on what were your standards.
Yep.
Having the clarity, having high enough self-worth that you're going to honor those standards,
Yep.
and gathering the data, being a love scientist in the early stages of dating, so that you're not over investing, over functioning early
Yep.
on, because then that's how you end up in a relationship for 6 years that was never meant to go past date number three.
Absolutely. It's interesting. I think that getting to a point when you get healthy enough within yourself and you have enough self-regard, you realize, my husband says this phrase, that when you want it bad, you get it bad. And I think that there was this fear prior to doing a whole lot of work myself. There was like a fear of being rejected. So the discernment that you're really talking about, Morgan, is we have to be discerning, right? Because we can't and don't want to marry every person we date. So the
Yeah.
more discerning we are, sooner than later, the less it's about potentially an unresolved father wound, let's say, because a lot of
Yes.
times my clients will be so afraid of someone pulling back or feeling like, oh, I think they're losing interest. And it's like this, they're panicking. And I'm like, hey, before, let's go back to who is this person? How have they treated you? How do you feel in their presence? Do they remember your friends' names? Are they interested in you? Like, because again, you're talking about if I'm so conflict avoidant and I'm so rejection avoidant that I don't even care who it is. I don't want to be rejected by anybody. That's when you stay in relationships for 6 years that should have ended long ago.
Absolutely. And I think there's just so much here in terms of I don't know about what your patterns were like before healing, but for me, I would constantly date people that were safe that I knew wouldn't leave me.
Yeah.
And I felt safe because I was over functioning for them and over giving. So that codependency became my safety,
Yep.
right? And it's like the very thing that feels safe is that thing that can leave you absolutely miserable and hating your life and your relationships never working out. So I think for me, gosh, becoming securely attached, healing my self worth, and realizing that piece of I am an individual. And even though over functioning feels like safety, it's actually slowly dying and killing me, right?
Yep.
Um,
It's control, right? When we think about
it's
any kind
control.
of, right, any kind of codependency, whether it's high functioning codependency or garden variety codependency, at its base, it is an overt or
Control.
covert bid to control someone else's feelings, situations, actions. And that's
Yes.
really what it is, which is why it does make you feel safer. Because when we are exercising control, we don't feel that same panic or that chaos that we feel in the unknown.
Yes. Yes. And this is why I would always date projects and people that I felt
Of
needed me. And it's
course.
that whole thing of, dating down, if you will. And
Hmm.
I remember starting to date after healing and being in a securely attached place and going on dates with someone where it was like, oh, you have a career and you have your car and you have a home and wow, you have good relationships with your family and your friends. And starting to date those people that were grown adult humans, that was so different for me in the early stages of dating in a secure way. But you start to realize we have to show up that way to know if we're even compatible with someone, if we even want that relationship to work.
Yes.
Because otherwise we're just in this trauma, messy, codependent place where compatibility doesn't even enter the chat when it's
No.
just baseline survival, right?
Yes. And you also can, a lot of times, which I've seen with women dating, is that it's really easy to confuse or conflate compatibility with being compliant.
Yes.
And they're not the same thing. So when
No.
I'll have a client who will be like, I mean, I don't know what's wrong with me. This relationship is amazing. We never fight. And I'm like, you never fighting does not make it an amazing relationship necessarily. And do you never fight because you always give in? Now that's confusing compliance with compatibility.
There's so much there, isn't there? Because I think we have to realize that in order to have closeness and intimacy, there is going to be conflict. If there's not conflict, then you don't have people being honest. If we're not honest, that's
Right.
how we stay in those relationships where there's no conflict. But conflict is just a sign of two independent adults who have each have high self-worth and are willing to express their true needs and desires.
Yes, healthy conflict. We
Healthy
will,
conflict.
yeah, we'll
Right.
say healthy conflict. All right, I want to ask you two more questions. One is for anybody listening or watching this who either feels like they're anxiously attached or avoidantly attached, or they're disorganized in some way. What are some steps that they can take to have more earned attachment, so to speak, or building more secure attachment, as you would say?
So, number one, it's great that you're tuning into a show like this. Getting the awareness is so important. We do have to start with awareness. I have an exercise I have all my clients do called the relationship inventory, which is where I would have you go look at your past relationships and I would just have you look at, okay, what are the attachment dynamics? How was I showing up, right? That might be a little bit advanced for someone who's just tuning in. I don't necessarily
Sure.
recommend doing that by yourself. But it's so important. I always, and I know you know this, for anyone who's really wanting to heal and really wanting to change their life and become securely attached and healthy, we do have to revisit the past.
Of
So I
course.
never want to gloss over that. We do. We have to revisit the past.
Yep.
But something that you can just start doing now that's easy would be developing your securely attached identity and thinking about what would securely attached me do in this moment. Kind of like what would Jesus do, but what would secure me do? You
Right.
know, and really for so many people, they've never thought about this. They've never had the models for it. They've never seen it. And they've never thought about it for themselves of, okay, what does a secure, emotionally available, healthy version of me, how do they think? What are their standards? What are their behaviors? And simply creating that identity and then asking yourself that question, what would secure me do? You
Yeah.
can start to have some behavior change.
I love it. I love it because I do think actually sort of stepping outside of ourselves in that moment and also recognizing if you're feeling anxious or if you're feeling a compulsion or if someone's taking longer to get back to you and you're feeling like, but you want to reach, even though it's really kind of their turn to reach to you, especially in the beginning of dating. I love this idea of what Dr. Morgan is saying, where you can simply say, what would secure me do? And she would probably chill. And she would probably make plans with friends. And she would probably
Yeah.
assume the person got caught up. And now I'm not saying that if the person said to you, I'm going to call you Friday at 5 and they don't call. That's not what I'm talking about, right? Because I feel like it's very important that if someone is not keeping their word, that you early and often just go, no. Like that has to be a deal breaker. At least for me,
Yes.
it is.
Yes, absolutely.
Because there's only going to
Yeah.
be more of that.
Yeah, absolutely. We have to notice, are people following through? Are they doing what they say they're going to do? And then I loved what you said about we have to see how people respond to our boundaries. Set boundaries early and often, see how
Yep.
people respond. So the follow through piece, the boundaries piece, you mentioned this, I say this all the time. how do you feel in their presence?
Yep.
Can you feel in your body that they are attuned to you and they are curious about you? Does it feel good to be in their presence? Or do you feel like you're self-abandoning and having to become a different version just to try to maintain communication, right? The answers are there. It's about slowing down, being able to be the love scientist, gather the data. And I loved what you said about friends, Terry. I want to talk about that for a second. The longer that I've been doing my healing work and now being married and having a long-term relationship over 6 years here, I just realized the importance of our connection needs not being met by one person,
Yep.
right? We're told this lie that our partner is supposed to be everything to us, and we put them on a pedestal, but it takes a lot of people to meet your connection needs, really truly. And
Absolutely.
yeah, I go on trips with my friends. You were talking about that. I'm like, yes, I do. And I have a husband that supports that, that loves that I do that, that
Yes.
encourages me. And I have him go on his guy trips, and I love that he does that. You want someone that says, oh, they can be whole. I can be part of their world, but I don't have to be their entire world. And
Yes.
that they're not, what's the word I'm looking for, intimidated by that.
Right. Or insecure, right? They're not insecure
Yeah.
about you going with your friends. When I like to think about it this way, Morgan, what you're saying is that, we have our needs. Let's say it's a bucket of need, and you have your husband who's pouring into your bucket, and you have your best friends who are pouring into your bucket, and you have your work that pours into your bucket. When you're in relationships that are very isolated, nobody can fill that bucket
Yeah.
like for you.
Yes.
And by being in a relationship, because I've had many clients who've had their husbands didn't want them to travel with their friends, or didn't, you know what I mean, was not supportive of that. And they were not happy in those relationships because you're multifaceted, right? You had your
Yeah.
friends before you had your husband.
Yes.
Some of them,
And yes, and a romantic relationship coming into your life, it does not fill a void, right? It's simply a multiplier of the joy that you already have. So be wary of if in early stages of dating you're getting to know someone who wants you to abandon those plans with your friends, or says, "Oh, you should skip your yoga class." Or why
yep,
are you going to brunch when we should be hanging out, right? It's
yep,
like you have to honor your life and welcome someone in to add value, but
yeah,
they cannot become your entire life. And I just I have so much empathy for all the people that have been stuck in that cycle, or that they've
yep.
been taught that's how it's supposed to be, because it truly is miserable. We find ourselves in the absolute most unhealthy relationships when we operate that way.
100%. You guys, this was Dr. Morgan Anderson. Her book is Love Magnet: Get Off the Dating Roller Coaster and Attract the Love You Deserve. And her pod, which I'm going to be on, promoting my new book, again, Let's Get Vulnerable. You can listen to that anywhere and everywhere. So, Morgan, tell us where we can find you.
Yes, so the podcast, absolutely. Let's get vulnerable everywhere podcasts are aired. And on Instagram at Dr. Morgan Coaching, Dr. Morgan Coaching.
Thank you so much for spending time with us today. I really appreciate you.
Thank you for having me.